Well, hello. It is really nice to see you. It is Sunday school lesson time, and I am glad that we have this opportunity, like I am every single week, and so thank you for coming. I have to tell you, this next part of the story, right, for the next several weeks is just kind of sad, because we're going to be watching people who know better decide to be bad. Have you ever been to someone's house, a friend's house, or a cousin's house, and the child that you're visiting decides to be bad, and you watch them be rude to their parents, or you watch them do things they're not supposed to do, or say things they're not supposed to say, and it's just kind of awful to watch it. You don't even really want to hear it. You don't want to see it, because watching this person do the thing they know is bad, that's going to result in punishment, it's really painful. There's going to be quite a bit of that in coming stories, in coming weeks. There's something else, too, to remember in the whole thing, right? You know when you decide to do the wrong thing. I'm not talking about making a mistake. Sometimes you and I, we choose to do the wrong thing, right? When you choose to do the wrong thing, what do your parents do? Well, if they're having a good parenting day, they punish you. There's a consequence. And parents on good parenting days don't punish us because they hate us or because they're filled with rage. No, they punish us because we need to learn to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. We need to learn that if you go on the wrong path too often, sometimes you get stuck there. That if you do the wrong thing, if you give yourself over to lies or badness, sometimes it's really hard to get out of it. So a good parent on a good parenting day will give a consequence. And there's going to be a lot of that too. That God, who is a perfect parent, watches these people that he loves decide to do the wrong thing. It's going to be hard to watch, but then we watch God give consequences to try to bring Israel back to where it should be. That's a lot of introduction. So the last time we were together, remember, Joshua died. He gave a big speech. He told everyone that they should choose who they were going to serve, who they were going to follow, and then he died. And you know, now what's Israel going to do? They don't have Moses. They don't have Joshua. What's going to happen? Remember, the Levites were spread out throughout the whole land to teach the people, but what if the people didn't listen to the Levites? That's pretty much what happened, by the way. You know, that the people decided not to listen. They decided not to do what they were supposed to do. They didn't get rid of all of the idols. Idols are false gods. They didn't get rid of them out of the land, and they didn't get rid of all the people that worshipped false gods. In fact, after a while, they got tired of fighting, and they just made friends. And sometimes children would grow up and they would marry people who believed in different gods. And when it was time for your wife or your husband to worship their God, sometimes, well, you'd go to church with them and worship their God. You understand how it happens. It just happened in a lot of families over time, and pretty soon very few people are going to Shiloh. Very few people are listening to the Levites. Very few people are doing what they're supposed to do. They've all forgotten. They're all bowing down to other gods. They're not keeping God's commandments and God's ordinances, even though they promised that they would. And so God sent a messenger to them. We're going to see a lot of that too. And the messenger said, what are you thinking? Don't you remember you were slaves in Egypt and God rescued you? God fed you in the wilderness. God took care of us. God gave us this land. He defeated our enemies. What's wrong with you? And the people of Israel thought, what is wrong with us? And they started to listen to God again. They listened to the Levites. They went to Shiloh. They did what they were supposed to do for a little while. But it's a lot of work to go to Shiloh 3 times a year, and it's a lot of work to do what God wants you to do, and it's easier not to. It's easier to just have fun. It's easier to do what you want to do instead of what God wants you to do. And pretty soon everyone has forgotten God's rules again, and God's commandments again. They're all doing their own thing. It's a terrible mess. God is really unhappy. And like a perfect parent, God has to send a consequence. So God let the king of Mesopotamia bring his army and defeat Israel. That's a big punishment, isn't it? That they're no longer free. They're not in charge of themselves. They have to do what this other king says. They have to pay taxes to this other king. And it wasn't very long before they thought, oh, we have been so bad. Remember when we followed God, God protected us from our enemies. Now we're not following God, and the king of Mesopotamia has taken over. Well, for 8 years, they got to have that punishment. It's a very long punishment. And then God tapped a new champion. Remember Caleb? Caleb and Joshua were the 2 spies that went in with the 12 spies into Canaan and came back and said God would provide. Remember Caleb? Well, his nephew, Othniel, was a good and faithful man who believed and who followed God and who did what he was supposed to do. And God said to Othniel, let's rescue Israel. So Othniel called the armies of Israel together, and God blessed them. They had a big conversation about how they were going to act and how they were going to do. God blessed them. They drove out the armies of Mesopotamia. They freed themselves from the rule of the king of Mesopotamia. And for 40 years, Othniel took care of Israel. He was in charge. The title he had was judge. That he was the judge of Israel. He told people what they should do, what they shouldn't do. He kept the rules. He kept order. He made people do what they were supposed to do before God, and everything was good until Othniel died. And it started all over again. The people forgot. They did the wrong thing. They chose not to honor God. You can guess what's going to happen next. But we're going to talk about it next week. All right, talk to you soon. Listen to your parents. Keep studying, keep learning, keep honoring God in your lives. Work on being truthful, kind, strong, generous people. And I'll see you soon. And I'll be so glad when it comes. Bye.